The Monkey Wrench Gang, a group of concerned citizens, today admitted the weekend theft of light bulbs from the Star on Flagstaff Mountain and left the bulbs at the Daily Camera. And that is from the Daily Camera article on the theft or vandalism that occurred at the Boulder Star, March 10th, 1980.
Can you guess what today's topic is?
And with that, we are live with House Einstein Podcast 63. And in today's podcast, this podcast is sponsored by House Einstein. We serve buyers and sellers in Colorado, focusing on Boulder, Denver, and several mountain resort towns, including Breckenridge and Winter Park. Our mission is simple: help you make a smarter real estate decision. You can learn more at houseeinstein.com or our YouTube channel, where you'll find videos on neighborhoods, specific listings, and much, much more. We are going to be discussing the real history of Boulder's iconic and beloved holiday star. We're also going to talk about other issues in real estate, including what happens when things go sideways with your client or with your agent, depending on who you are listening to this podcast. We'll talk about market conditions here in Boulder. We'll do a very brief segment on shameless self-promotion with one of our listings. We'll talk about several sales of the week, and then a couple of news items before we reach our usual carve-outs. And if you are new to this podcast, our mission is to help you make a smarter real estate decision. We are here to entertain you and discuss real estate matters, but officially this podcast is entertainment. So please do not make any real estate decisions based on what you hear in this podcast or any decisions at all. This podcast is humor. That is its official category. If you are a client of the House Einstein Real Estate Brokerage, please pick up the phone and call your real estate agent. We are here to serve you. Phone is usually the best way to reach me, particularly if we're going to talk about important matters, but email and text also work, and we are always here to help you. We work in the Denver market, the Boulder market, sometimes into the resort mountain towns, but also some of the Boulder foothills, and we work all the way up to Fort Collins as well. That's my area of focus, but we will gladly help you find an agent that we think is highly qualified if you are seeking a referral in another market, so don't hesitate to reach out to us.
That's right. We even talked about the referral that we do in the previous podcast.
That's right.
Or the one beforehand, perhaps. But
yeah, and our process for that. It's not just who cuts a check and ends up on our list, like troubleshooter networks and all sorts of things you hear online that people have been quote unquote quote certified or landed on a special list. No, we actually research who we refer to, and we have an interview process who we refer to. And that way we know our clients are very well taken care of. So we've covered the topics of the day. We have talked about our mission. We've warned you not to make any real estate decisions based on what you hear in this podcast. We didn't really cover our bios, but that's okay. You can find them at houseeinstein.com. We've been doing this a long time, and hopefully that's enough to get started.
I think so. Our new segment, just a rename of the old one, is The Closing Table. And we're talking the history of the star. We've put together kind of like a timeline here of first conception to that article that we introduced the podcast with. So, Oz, do you want to? Yeah.
And on our social media, you'll see a little bit of content, at least on, I think I shared this on the House Einstein Instagram as well. But on my Instagram, you'll see some history about the star. And Hamish has got some fantastic footage that he shot of the star, so check that out if you'd like some additional fleshing out of this podcast. So here is the real history of the Boulder Star, researched in part with the assistance of an intern last year and then rounded out this year. So Grant, if you're listening, thank you. This is based on some of the work you did last year. Okay, so let's rewind the clock. It is prior to World War II, and in 1938, the idea of the Boulder Holiday Star came about. And it came about in response to another holiday star at Palmer's Lake on Sundance Mountain. So in 1947, are you sure that's 38 or 48, Hamish?
38.
it's 38. So this is 9 years later.
Yeah.
9 years later.
Everything moves quick in government.
Well, yeah, everything does move quick in government. It was a consortium of people that were involved that laid out the first star with toilet paper. And they managed to build it, not particularly well, but they managed to build it with 230 sockets, each containing a 25-watt incandescent bulb. And then a few days before Christmas, on December 22nd, 1947. So remember, this is World War II is over, and the country is entering an economic boom. And they lit up the star in celebration of the holidays. And while they were building that holiday star, they realized that with some minor adjustments, they could do another icon for Easter. And that Easter, they lit up Boulder's first holiday cross. It measured 230 feet long by 104 feet wide.
Jeez.
And it was iconic even then. 1951, new stringers were made and permanently attached to guy wires so that all that needed to be done each year was put in the light bulbs. And this new installation contained 500 sockets. In the 1960s, it was revealed that more than 400 individuals and organizations were supporting the holiday star every year through the Boulder Chamber of Commerce. And much of the cost of those early years was just paying for the damage caused by random vandals. And we're going to talk about a couple of specific vandalisms that occurred. So we'll get to that. But in 1970, so now we're fast forwarding over almost 20 years. And City Council, in their infinite wisdom, tried to ban all lighted displays on Flagstaff Mountain. But disappointed star lovers protested so vigorously that a compromise was reached to allow the star to be turned on each Christmas season. But the cross was banned as a religious symbol, but the star, being not quite so religious, was allowed to continue. And at that City Council meeting, where they tried to ban both the star and the cross, over 300 people attended. The crowd overflowed into the adjacent municipal courtroom, halls, and down the stairs outside the doors of the chamber. And just as a footnote for real estate aficionados, Charles Hartling was one of the council members who voted against the ban.
That's really cool trivia. That's sweet.
Yeah. He didn't want to ban it, the cross at all. He was perfectly happy with that cross. And there was quite a bit of discussion over tyranny of the minority and majority, and protecting minority rights to have a religious or non-religious symbol on municipal property, and whether that would be allowed or not, and what the Constitution said. And of course they got into it. It's the City Council, and they compromised with that partial ban. Yeah, it's Boulder. They compromised with a partial ban. Okay, let's fast forward almost another decade. 9 years later, and Hamish, we're still way before you were born, which is kind of funny. I am age of 5. No, I'm 4 in 1979.
Wow. Okay.
When the city of Boulder vowed to keep the star lit until the Iran hostages were brought home. And so do you know anything about the Iran hostage situation at that time? You didn't get it in your history classes?
No.
Well, we're not going to cover it all here, and I didn't here to cover it.
Real estate podcast,
but I could say that what I learned as a child was that the Shah was deposed, which was a U.S.-backed government, and the religious government that exists today in the Islamic Republic of Iran took over, and they captured, I think, the U.S. embassy, or maybe there was a U.S. base there, and they had a bunch of hostages. And Jimmy Carter was president, and his handling of the hostages was probably why he lost to Ronald Reagan in 1980. And in fact, the Iranians held the hostages until Reagan took office. And that was very symbolic. And we're seeing maybe an echo of history with that, with Trump taking office, and maybe Putin will be negotiating once Trump is in office, sort of the same kind of echo. But Carter was very, very criticized for his handling as being weak and Reagan, the hostages came home is when Reagan took office. So there you have it. I don't know if that's actually true. Likely it's just political theater as usual. But remember, I was 4. So
yeah, right.
I don't really know what was going on here. Okay, I'm like, my interests were very limited at 4 years old.
I could imagine.
Okay, so let's keep going. Boulder vowed to keep the star lit until the Iran hostages were brought home, and that same year, or maybe into the winter, at some point between when they did that and March, the star was vandalized twice. Once it was completely chopped down by a group called Boulder Falls, who called it an eyesore and a waste of energy, although they expressed sympathy for the hostages. And the chamber raised money to replace it in just 10 days. And then in 1980, another group called the Monkey Wrench Gang removed all of the bulbs and delivered them to the Daily Camera. That was the news piece that I shared earlier, and they accused the chamber of ignoring deer and other wildlife. and that's where our history lesson ends from the Carnegie Library. And the star has been lit ever since I've been in Boulder, since 2000, and until recently you could actually hike right up to it. So it was very much a tradition to go up there and sit under the stars in the snow maybe, and see the city below you. It was absolutely beautiful and extremely steep. The terrain where the star is
it's
like...
on a grade, yeah.
It is. Have you been there? Have you climbed up to it? Okay,
yeah.
While it was still lit. You were while it was you were able to. You got up there.
I showed you pictures of me up there.
Oh, that's right. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thanks for reminding me. Yeah. So, really, it was an annual tradition for me and my friends to go up there, and we'd bring the dogs, and I've got some photos too, and they're really nice memories of that experience. Tell me about your visits to the star, Hamish. How old were you?
Yeah, I mean, like, talking about, like, history ending in 1980s, I guess it was the pandemic when they restricted access to the star, right? And it's been restricted ever since, I think.
Is that when they started? I don't remember.
So.
I mean, there's so much erosion there that it's not a surprise.
That makes sense, yeah. It's a bummer, though, right? Because, yeah, it was, I mean, ever since I had a driver's license, we would always go up, sometimes multiple times a year. It was kind of a cool hang spot. And, like, those pictures that I'd shared, yeah, it was just a fun place for us to go as, teenagers and pass the time, hang out. You weren't doing anything bad up there because there were so many people. Like, it wasn't the spot for teenagers to be seedy or anything. But it was just a really cool kind of place, just a congregation point. A little sad it's gone now, though. Yeah.
Flagstaff Mountain is probably one of the first places that newcomers visit in Boulder. They drive up there, and there's places to look down on the city. There's an amphitheater. There's hiking trails that are very steep and wind their way up. And, of course, cyclists all summer go up and down. I've done it myself a few times. It's quite the hair-raising trip back down.
It's a narrow road. If you don't know Flagstaff, there's not really room for bikes and cars at the same time. It's tight.
It's not a great spot for that, but people do it. And in fact, they loop through 4 Mile. They go over, they will go up 4 Mile, come down up and over Escape Route, down Sugarloaf, and then cross over there and then go up the backside of Flagstaff and then come back down Flagstaff.
Jeez.
It's because they opened that, and I think it was a negotiation in the replacement of that bridge. That I think it's a motel or something on the other side that the county agreed to pay for the bridge replacement after the flood of 2013 if they allowed bicyclists to go through. And so now that's become a very, very popular cycling route. I will do it maybe next summer. Cool. I might need some e-bike assistance to get my out-of-shape body up and over, but we'll do it.
Yeah, okay. That might be something I'd have to train for. Yeah.
Maybe, Hamish. Maybe you can't rely on the 20-year-old genetics forever. They will eventually come and haunt you.
Yeah.
So I think to the community, the Boulder Star really represents just the spirit of the holidays. It is a season in many faiths, and even people that are not faith-oriented recognize the solstice and the importance of these, the darkness, the seasonal cycle. It's a It's a very natural thing, and that star is very symbolic for many, many people. It's really the start of the holiday season, although it doesn't go in before Thanksgiving.
I'm not entirely sure when it goes up.
It's like right after Thanksgiving it gets lit. So
it's always
anyway.
like, it's always a treat, you know, like if you're driving into Boulder at night and the star's lit, it's just kind of like, oh, look, you know, the star's up. Like it brings up a lot of kind of fond memories and emotions. It's just a great thing to come into. I brought up to my mom that we were going to talk about the star in the podcast, and she's like, oh, did you know your grandpa helped construct it? And I was like, grandpa was born in 46, so that feels fishy. So I reached out to him, and he didn't have anything to do with the star, but he did have some pretty additional, I guess, vandalism stories. Apparently Mines has a bit of a rivalry with CU and DU. And so some students from Mines, when my grandpa was in attendance in the 60s, went over to the star and reshaped it into an M for Colorado Mines. So that was like the closest thing to involvement he's got. But I just thought that was a fun little piece of trivia. We didn't see any news cuttings of that, though.
We didn't, although there is a photo of what appears to be an A. So the star being reshaped into an A, and there was no notes on what that was. But for sure, there have been many instances of damage caused by vandals, and that's the other reason that they're not allowing people up there, is that it's expensive to keep repairing the damage caused by vandals. So this is why we can't have nice things.
Yeah, unfortunately. I remember too, one of the reasons was supposed to be like people getting hurt, which fair, right? We mentioned the grade, and especially when it's been trodden on, it becomes like this thick ice slab. I've definitely had some falls going up and down the star, but you know, it's such a fond tradition and memory that it's, you know, just sad to see, sad that you can't go up there anymore.
It's so much easier with micro spikes. We would bring micro spikes and climb right up. It was no problem. But yeah.
So you had your frontal cortex at that point. I did not.
Yeah, my brain was fully formed, and I had the right equipment. All right, so let's move on into our second topic, and this is really the topic for the closing table. And it came up recently on a situation in real estate on whether you can or cannot, in what circumstances are you allowed to fire your agent or fire a client if you are a real estate agent listening to this. So before we get started on that, let me remind you that this podcast is set in Colorado, and real estate is regulated at the state level. And if you are listening to this podcast outside of the state of Colorado, what we say may or may not apply to you at all. And you should consult your local regulatory authority. You should read your contracts very carefully. And before you hire an agent, you should have conversations about what does it look like if this isn't working for me? Like, you're asking me to go into an exclusive arrangement with you, and I don't know you very well. So how do I know that you're not going to just turn into a scoundrel and not let me out? How do I know that, like, we're going to have a good and healthy working relationship? And these are actually very fair questions to ask. And the answer should sound like this. This is what we tell our clients, that, look, we are not perfect and we will make mistakes from time to time. Your job and your obligation is, if we are not meeting your expectations, to tell us at the time that we are not meeting your expectation so that we can improve. And it's quite possible that your expectations are impossible to meet. Okay, we have had those clients. I've had them early in my career. These days I can suss it out a mile away, and I'm usually not meeting with people that have, they want to buy Boulder real estate at a 50% discount. Those are not likely to be successful. And people that want to send letters to everybody in town and hope that there's a sucker out there that will sell the property at a huge discount to fair market, those are not my people either. That's usually unethical and a wholesaler mentality. So usually I'm sussing out those people before we have that before we even get to a point of contract. But if we are about to enter into a contract, very fair to ask that question. And what we look for is feedback, and our client's obligation is to provide that feedback in a way that we actually have an opportunity to respond. I can assure you that I will never intentionally say or do things that are offensive, but sometimes the inner 14-year-old boy might come out, and I might say something that I think is funny at the time, but doesn't land, right? Like, the thing about making a joke is that sometimes jokes are inappropriate. Sometimes they don't land. I'm not usually making those kinds of jokes, but every once in a while, maybe I've done that. Maybe there's an opportunity for us to fix this relationship. And it's really important for that feedback to be actionable, specific, and timely in order for the feedback to actually have an opportunity to address what's the cause of concern. So that's what we look for from you and if as a client. And if you provide us with that and an opportunity to address whatever your concern might be, and it looks like we're not able to make you happy and figure this situation out in a fair and reasonable way, we will look to let you exit from the contract. But we expect you to hold up your end of the deal as well. And so meeting expectations is a really important part of hiring a real estate agent, and understanding their expectations for responsiveness, for professionalism, for negotiation skill, for analysis and due diligence support. Like all of these, there's certain expectations of both sides for these areas of a real estate transaction, and the most important one is trust. And I've said this on other podcasts, and I'm going to say it again, that when you choose your real estate agent, you're choosing somebody that you trust, or you should be. If you're not sure you can trust this person, they're acting in ways that erode trust or disingenuous or make you feel uncomfortable for some reason that you don't think that they have your best interest in mind, you're going to have a very hard time trusting them under the pressure of a real estate deal. And I'll give you an example of this conversation I just had with family members who we did a referral for. And they called me asking me all sorts of questions about a contract that's out of state.
Oh, yep.
And my question for them was, why aren't you asking your agent these questions? Well, we're not sure she's giving us the straight talk. And I'm like, well, hold on. She's your agent, and she's explaining the contract for that state. This is somebody I interviewed her. She is very well qualified. She has 40 years of experience. She's been the president of her local board, and her real estate firm dominates that local area. And she passed my interview with almost flying colors.
You've got a good interview system too, right?
Right. We went through a detailed interview. She passed it. Why aren't you trusting her? And they're like, well, maybe we should go back and ask her these questions. I'm like, yeah, ask her these questions. Because what they were asking me about just didn't make any sense. What they thought they understood from her just didn't make any sense. And it involved list date versus start of the listing, and what the contract says, like the day they sign, is that the day it goes active? Which of course it doesn't, but I can't tell them that because I'm not in that state. Right? Like I was like, that doesn't make any sense. I don't agree with that either. Talk to her. What about when she can begin showings? What about coming soons? When can she start marketing? There are rules for that in the NAR, but her agent, their agent, that experience.
It's probably the best source to go to.
That's the best source, not me. So I was happy to help them flesh out their concerns and have a good conversation. But it reminded me that in the middle of a deal, right, you're negotiating. Like we just submitted an offer yesterday, got a counter today, had a nice 20-minute phone call with my client to discuss what we do next, what the next steps might be. I'm advising them to the best of my ability with their best interest in mind, and they're the ones that have to make the decision at the end of the day on what strategy we pursue. If they were to say do this or that and I don't agree with it, I will do it because they're the boss. If they're asking me to do things that are unethical or illegal or immoral, I'm going to bow out. So now let's flip to the other side. How does an agent end the relationship? That's way easier. So the contracts are very much weighted toward the agent being able to fire their client. And in theory, there's nothing in there that says because you can't meet the client's expectation, you can fire them. But what you can start to do is suggest that they have a better fit with another real estate agent. And you can explain, look, I don't think we're a good fit because I don't think I can meet your expectations. That's what you should do. You're trying to buy Boulder real estate at a 50% discount. You're trying to take advantage of widows and orphans. You are trying to, like, you want to drop a dead fish in the basement during our showing to keep away other buyers. I can't do any of those. You're looking for blood
in the steel.
Right? Like you want to do things that I can't do. And I don't feel good about even the fact you asked me to do these things. And I think you would be better served with another real estate agent. And I'm happy to release you from the contract at this point. If you would like, we can exit it. I've only had one of those that immediately come to mind. And they wanted to buy multiple investment properties. This is more than 10 years ago. And the first transaction was so challenging
I'm glad
And
you're telling the story. I
wasn't-
was going to bring it up. Yep.
It was not, so it was a husband and wife team, and they came to me because they wanted analysis, and they wanted due diligence support, and they wanted good negotiation advice, and that's what we offer. And the husband I started working with was fine and valued those things, but the wife hated real estate agents, was suspicious of all real estate agents, assumed every agent's a crook, and looked for every proof of that at every step of the way, which made every step of the transaction so much more difficult. And at the closing table, the title clerk comes out, and she's like, "Okay, we're all done," and she goes to hand the agents their checks. And when she goes to hand me my commission check, this client, the wife, reaches for it, stands up, reaches for it, and says, "That's for me, ha, ha, ha." And after all of that, it was just so overwhelmingly insulting, like didn't value anything we did and felt like that was her money. I laughed and said, no, that's for me, and took the check, and she let it go. And then as people were leaving, I sat there thinking about this, and that was the final straw, was when she did that.
At the same closing table, right?
As people were leaving,
Yeah.
The husband said, "Okay, so should we talk about the next deal?" And I said, "Can we just sit down for a minute? We have the room. Let's just close the door and chat." And as soon as the door was closed, I turned to them and said, "Look, we've fulfilled the buyer agency agreement. One deal is complete. It only really specified one deal. I think we were very successful. You got a great property at a great price. I think it's going to be a really good investment for you in the long run. But at this point, this is our opportunity to end things. And it doesn't feel like we have a great working relationship." And I looked at the wife, and the wife's like, "You mean we can exit now?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we don't need to continue to work together." She's like, "Great." She grabs her paperwork and marches out the door. And I'm like, "Okay, there you go." And the husband just looks at me shocked. And I just
didn't
shrugged.
see it at all. Yeah.
I just shrugged, and I'm like, it's not a good fit. Like at that moment, I could have signed them up for another round. We could have kept going. I just could tell this is a very difficult relationship when they don't trust me together and they don't value the work we're doing. It doesn't make any sense to keep beating our head against a wall. There are plenty of other clients out there. There are plenty of other agents. Maybe they can find somebody who, would give them a massive discount to just open doors and let them write the offer. They can just look over it or something. I'm not sure. Like, they clearly didn't value agents. So, which is fine.
Yeah.
Many agents don't deserve that trust, by the way. I'm going to add that into this piece. So this is why interviewing these people,
we don't blame a lot of people for their distrust at the same time, like we've seen it on our side.
I mean, sometimes it's just accidental disclosures that I'm just shocked by, the things that the other side will accidentally disclose about their client that really compromises this person in the negotiation. But more often than not, it's a lack of professionalism. It's a lack of commitment to due diligence. It's a lack of fiduciary responsibility. And a really good interview can suss out 80% of those bad actors. Good reviews can help you get past the others. And then maybe having an initial meeting or two before you agree to go under a buyer agency agreement. Now in Colorado, you have to do these individually. So you can't schedule a showing without it, which is weird and hopefully changes because you have the ability to test drive your agent is reduced. So what we've been doing is agreeing to one-day versions in some cases. And once we've done a one-day version or 2 one-day versions, we will then, or a week-long version of a buyer agency, will then do our standard 6 months to a year, depending on circumstances. And typically it's a year.
Yeah. No, I mean, I can't speak for other brokerages, but for us at least, we're more interested in finding you the right house and making sure that we have a good relationship. We aren't just in it for the check, right? Like, we're not going to put up with either disrespect on either end or weak communication. With the right to correct and the ability to effectively communicate, we can overcome a lot of things, but we aren't going to shove somebody into a house and just collect the check on the way out. So it's difficult to kind of have that almost projected towards us when we're trying to really advocate and fulfill kind of the fiduciary duty we've been given to its highest amount. We're
doing our best, and I admit that I get a little triggered by the childhood trauma that can sometimes trigger me when people think we are up to no good and scoundrels, and I get very reactive when I'm accused of that. But it's super rare, Hamish. This is like, in your time with the brokerage, 3 years. How many, you've seen this once, maybe twice? It's sort of once every 5 years kind of scenario. And I suspect what's happening is not our lack of service. It's really they think they can get a better deal with somebody else. Somebody has promised them something. Like I had this deal, this is actually like 3 or 4 years ago, maybe right before you joined. And there's another agent in town who took my clients to dinner. She lives in the neighborhood, and she's not a bad agent. We've done many deals together. And they came away convinced that she's the best agent for them. And they wanted to write an offer with her. And I said, you're under a buyer agency. And what resulted was a series of meetings with them where I try to say, look, we will let you out of a buyer agency agreement if we're not performing. But you can't just go, it's sort of like you're married to somebody and you see this hot person on the bus and you ask them out. You shouldn't be asking them out. You're married to somebody else. Like legal agreements are very serious things, and casually breaking them is not something we do anymore. Like there really needs to be a legitimate reason. And another agent that's better looking is not a reason. Another agent that promises you something like, hey, we have this super secret club called the Private Network, which is nonsense, but they claim that. It's been a while since we've talked about pocket listings. Maybe we got to bring them back. Of pocket listings. Like I could show you the data that says that is so rare, and if it does exist, somebody is putting too much money on the table. It is not a fair market deal, and it's likely you, not the person they have a pre-existing relationship with. So the salesiness of the other agent is not a relevant factor. Like we can measure our performance very specifically on responsiveness, on writing contracts, negotiation aggressively, good communication, deal management. Like there are all these different ways we can improve always, because that's what we want to do. But ending relationships in a way that suddenly midstream, we've been working together 3 months and they're like, nope, we're done, and they don't have a good reason for it is very strange, and not expect some pushback. Yeah, no, it's funny because like we're talking about this in the case of agency agreements, but we also kind of talk about this, I'd say almost exact thing about, going under contract. You can't just decide you're done with the house and leave. You're under contract. You have an obligation to fulfill it. And that we bring that up in, like inspection. And like kind of, what is it? Good faith or earnest, being an earnest, it's good faith. Good actor. Yeah. That's exactly right. It's good faith, Hamish. You should not be, this is when clients ask me, can I put 2 offers in on the same weekend on different houses? And the answer if you want to go under contract twice, sure. Are you buying 2 houses? Because it's not, there's this good faith provision in the contract, and I'm not going to bust you, but you really shouldn't be doing that, and I don't recommend it, and I work for you, but what you're doing could potentially cost you your earnest money. And usually when I bring that provision up, all of them back down. None of them want to write 2 offers when I'm like, it's a violation of the good faith provision. Yeah. And Boulder's a small town. You really don't want to be running around trying this game. It's really, it's interesting what people try to do, but I will say in the context of this conversation, it's really important to bring up the flip side. So the same week that this topic came up, I had 3 different clients that same week. It's like the universe is reminding me of the positive. This is negative cognitive bias, but the universe is saying you need 3 things to overcome one negative, 3 positive things. And 3 immediately came up the same week that I was having a difficult conversation. And all 3 of them are past clients who sing nothing but praise, deeply appreciate us reaching out. One of them I spent time in Greece with. The other one reached out because they actually I reached out to them because we might be bringing them an offer, even though their listing is currently not on the market. And they didn't even know that. We have been off the market for a few months, and the first 10 minutes was just really pleasant, warm, kind conversation. Before we even got to what's going, like, I might have an offer for you, I'm working on it. And then the last one was a sale from this summer. We re-represented the sale, and they bought a property with somebody else, right. And they had intentionally decided to do that in the beginning. Yeah, I think we even got a word in, right? I told them, before we even got a word in, I'm like, well, that's fine. I don't recommend it, but I will play by that rule. And we never even met the other agent. But I got a phone call from them with an inspection issue that they think should have been disclosed. or should have been discovered by the inspector. And we kind of walked through what that was. And we spent maybe half an hour on the phone. And afterward, they were just really grateful. And they said, we're definitely going to use you again. And we really, really appreciate you. And we deeply regret that we didn't use you for this transaction. And I told them it's not about the transaction. Like, I will gladly take 30 minutes of my time and talk to you at any point in the future, whether or not there's a real estate transaction involved. And I don't always have the answer. And I also have to caveat this, that I'm not going to get involved with a transaction I wasn't involved with to begin with. There are rules around that. But I'm happy to have a conversation with you and tell you what I know and give you my best advice on whatever the situation is. And hopefully that adds value to you. And I will always do that. It's not about that one transaction.
Yeah. I think we've covered it fairly well. It's just, it's an interesting one, because that question we get a lot from a lot of clients is they see the contract and they're like, well, how do I get out? And we have thought about it, and we've been asked it, so we have a prepared response. But I can't imagine imagine if an agent's like, nope, you can't get out, sign it, and let like, you're in, you're locked.
Yeah. I mean, there's a legitimate feedback system that we expect of you. If you want to terminate, we need a shot at fixing whatever the issues are. And we need to understand these issues in detail and see where we can improve, and be given a shot for it. Because if your expectations are us to run a 4-minute mile, I'm too old for that. But I could tell you, I am I don't want to do that. Available nights. I'm available weekends. I don't go on vacation without making sure there's a plan. And I bring my laptop on vacation, and I'm making phone calls from anywhere in the world if I happen to travel, which I sometimes do in the fourth quarter. And you're here on the ground, and there's 2 other agents that cover me that are part of the team. Like, how many backup people do you need? Like, you've got a shortstop, you've got a person on third base, second base, first base, the outfield.
You keep Starlink with you, like.
Right, yeah. I travel with Starlink, for God's sakes. Like, I'm never not available without coverage. So it's an interesting thing, but it's a good opportunity to talk about expectations for service. So when people ask that question, my goal is to, let's talk about why you might want to break up. Let's talk about what your expectations are of us as a company and me as a human. And let's see let's talk about what if I'm not meeting your expectations, how do we deal with it? And what's that feedback mechanism? And if they want, what we don't want to do is create a situation where we work for someone for months and then they're like, this really hot realtor took me out to dinner last night and I really want to go out with her again. Like, no.
Or him.
Or him. Or them. Yeah. Okay. All right, let's move on before I say anything else inappropriate.
You've done great. And also, since I've been working with you, I don't think the 14-year-old boy brain has come out at all. So I think you're good there, man.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And I do my best to,
because I keep a list.
Like I look like an adult. I try to act like an adult. You better not be keeping a list. But if the conversation is headed to debauchery at our company, I'm exiting from the conversation and encouraging you guys to think better. But we don't do that. We've got a great team of very mature, kind, respectful people in our company. So we're not Wolf of Wall Street over here.
Gladly, happily, proudly. Yeah. Okay.
All right, let's move on to market conditions. So in preparation for this podcast, and because of the time of year, I looked at withdrawn and expired listings. And really, in the past, I've called this failed listings, okay? Listings that did not sell. And it doesn't necessarily mean it was the agent's fault or the house's fault. It could be the market. And we've seen a lot of them this year, and I've been talking about that for the last 3 or 4 months. And now we've got data to back up what I told you was going to happen in September and October. And what happened was that so let's do the data. In 2023, last November, there were 114 withdrawn and expired listings in Boulder County specifically. And this November, there were 294. And that's an increase of 158%. 158%.
It's a small rise. Yep.
It's a massive increase in the number of failed listings. And why did that happen? It happened because prices have been sliding downward. It happened because rates are high. It happened because there's a lot more inventory and the sales have been lower. So there's a lot of disappointed sellers out there, which, by the way, is a strategy to get a better deal is to sift through
if you're a buyer,
withdrawn and expired listings. So, dear clients, if you are listening to this, yes, you have to be a client. Pick up the phone, call me, let's do a video call, and we will go through withdrawn and expired listings. And if there's something really exciting in the dead pile, I will call the seller and see if they are still under a listing agreement. If it's expired, withdrawn is still listed. If it's expired, you can see if there's a listing agreement in place, if they are thinking about coming back to market. By the way, I might have a buyer. And it means frankly more commission for me. It's at a discount, and it's a discount for the seller. So they pay less than full commission. I make a little more than I would normally because now I'm working both sides of a transaction and negotiating that, and handling the management of that transaction is very nuanced to do it right. But it's a win-win for everybody. My client gets a deal on the house, the seller pays less commission, and potentially you deal with a seller who's so fed up with the market that they
could get a good deal.
They could just capitulate right off the bat. So that's the situation. 158% more failed listings this November. Total inventory, 1,069 properties are on the market as of November. Per the data, that's 26% more than last year. Pending sales, 302 pending sales last month, November. That's up 17%. So that's an interesting contrarian data point. There's more pending sales this November than a year ago. And the median price countywide, this is Boulder County, combined attached and detached, is down 2.1%. So not particularly massive decrease in value, but
by square footage.
Down. Yeah, that's dollar per square, $3.34 a square. Yep. So, I've given you some data about market conditions, and I've given you some tidbits of advice. 1, look through withdrawn and expired listings. 2, this is the time of year that sellers are more likely to capitulate. 3, if you're thinking about listing, you probably should wait till January or even February. If you wait till February, there's going to be more market data, and likely the market's going to be stronger. And in fact, that pending sale number going up indicates that there's some signs of potential strength in the spring. So it's possible the spring will be stronger, and certainly there'll be more buyers in the market than mid-December. So you should wait. If anybody's telling you differently, they don't have your best interest in mind. I will say that point blank, unless they've got a great argument for why right now is a good time to bring a listing to market. I look forward to hearing it, why 3 weeks from now is not a great time. But now is really good.
Yeah, 2 weeks from a pretty large nationally celebrated holiday.
Right.
Yeah.
From the biggest holiday of the year,
Yeah.
at least here in the United States. So that is market conditions. That's a little actionable advice. And if your agent is not performing and you are not tied to an agent, meaning you are not obligated to use an agent, you are more than welcome to reach us at houseeinstein.com. We've got a great group of agents, not just me, but I am certainly I'm happy to be your agent. But you may also find a great fit with the other agents on the team, because we all share this philosophy of helping our clients be smarter about their real estate decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. Shall we promote ourselves shamelessly?
All right. Well, that was already a little shameless self-promotion. So we'll shamelessly self-promote one of our listings. So this listing, 3707 Telluride Cir, is in Shanahan Ridge. A couple of years ago, there were bidding wars for every condo in Shanahan Ridge, most of which were not updated, and people were overpaying. This listing is priced right. It's been nicely updated, and it is turnkey and ready to go. It is staged, and I encourage people to go take a look at it. If you happen to be listening to this podcast, I think it's in the top 10% of this style of townhome that I've seen in 21 years at Shanahan Ridge. And if it doesn't sell in December, as I just explained, it's a slower time of year, it will certainly be selling this spring, because it is a rock star of a little property. And I've actually thought about buying it myself. The current rate environment is not particularly great for investors. But if my parents were moving to Boulder, I would encourage them to think about this because of its main floor bedroom and its walkability to some of the most spectacular open space trails in all of Boulder. It's in great schools. It's just up the hill from grocery, the high school, the middle school, the track, and Veely Lake and the rec center. And there's so much going on that is just down the street from this property. So if you're an outdoor lover and like to hike in particular and want a very low maintenance experience, a downsizing experience perhaps, this is a great fit. Check out 3707 Telluride Circle.
Yeah, that's the first property I've seen, in that area, the townhome development. I don't know what, in that little spot. And it's one of my favorite areas for townhomes for sure. It's a little bit older, so you have kind of more space between buildings, as well as all the other upsides Osman brought up. But it's fantastic kind of working with you all and getting to see all the different areas of Boulder and doing a compare and contrast. And yeah, it's a great spot.
One of the things you just mentioned, Hamish, I think is really important to point out that as development occurs over time, here in Boulder, the land has gotten so extremely valuable that density is the only thing that developers want to build. That's where the profit is, at least large-scale developers. They can't do large housing developments of single-family houses very easily. And if they could, they would maximize they would basically do 4,000 square foot lots or smaller, like postage stamp lots, and build the biggest house they could on it because the dirt is so valuable. And this Shanahan Ridge townhome does feel spacious. There are parks all around it. It does not feel penned in at all. And you would never build it like this today.
No, that's the worst thing. Little tangent here, but just seeing all the new ones and how close they are together. I get it. Density, it's cheaper and, leave more open space or whatever. But it is just, I couldn't. I'm very glad that I'm not currently living in one of those places. Yeah.
Same. All right, shall we move on to our sales of the week?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
All right. Let's get after it. So the first one is 621 Maxwell Avenue. And this historic 2-story house on Maxwell Ave, located between 9th Street and 4th Street, right? This little section is just north of the Mapleton Hill Historic District. In fact, I think it is in the Historic District. Yeah, it is in the Historic District. I always think of Mapleton Hill as ending, but no, it goes forward all the way to Concord. So it's in the Mapleton Hill Historic District, and it is really nicely updated. Had been listed originally in June at 3.375, and then at the end of that month they cut it to just under 3, and then 2.5 months later they cut it again, another 75,000 to 2.9, and then what happened next? Nothing. So 2 weeks later they cut it again to 2.75. So they enacted a very aggressive cost-cutting strategy, and by November it found a buyer. And the buyer negotiated an additional $300,000 off of the list price, which in my mind is astonishing because this is a home that I would have expected in the peak of summer to exceed $3 million, and instead it sold for $500,000 below 2.45, so $550,000 below that $3 million benchmark. And it's a functional house. So 4 bedrooms, 3 of which are on the upper level, 1 of which is on the main. 3 bathrooms and a 2-car detached garage. That's like the basics for a livable house for most people. And it's 3,500 square feet in one of the most desirable spots in all of Boulder. Super cute on the outside with the little classic porch. And the interior updates are, I think, attractive. They're not gaudy or inappropriate for a historic house. It's just a spectacular little property. And that additional space above the garage is really cool. That studio above, technically probably not a rentable space, although I've heard some stories about how those things are done in the middle of the night, but that is not technically a rentable space. But what a great little spot for a home office. I mean, all day long, I would at this price, I would have bought it and moved into it because it's one of my favorite spots in all of town and a really attractive historic home. Excellent deal on the part of the buy side.
No kidding.
An example of a fantastic deal in the fourth quarter, closing in December before Christmas, before the seller has a change of mind and decides that maybe there's a better buyer coming in the spring, which is sometimes what happens around this time of year. They decide, I'm not going to deal with a low baller right now. Let's just hope for a better number in January or February when the cycle switches the other way. Mm-hmm. They didn't. They took it. So
Yeah, I don't know if my source is 100% accurate, but I'm seeing too that the last sale was in 2004. So talk about equity as well on the seller's part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's right. The data shows 2004 was the last transaction. So if you are looking to offer low on a property, it makes sense to check when the last time it transacted and also what the last mortgage was, which appears to have only been 681 in 2020. So 4 years ago, they took out a mortgage for 681 or refied or something.
Yeah, I wonder for updates.
Yeah, so they capitulated. I think that's an amazing deal on a fantastic house. And if I have time, I might talk about this house in the newsletter that I will write this month, Hamish. I'll pull up the history of the home itself because I love looking up the historic homes and seeing who originally owned it and what data we can find in the appraisal card, the historic record. So, all right, let's move on.
The neurolinguistic programming there. I will write this month. You got this.
I got 2 months in a row, Hamish. We're not going to lose track now.
I fully support. I'm just voicing my support, I guess.
One of the key differences in the newsletter, by the way, is that I will talk about active listings. I can't talk about active listings in this podcast or anywhere else that's public for the matter because of various rules, but you will find me discussing active listings in the newsletter that is aimed specifically for our clients and prospective clients. You have to sign up to get it, but don't worry, we're not going to harass you if you... What's that?
HouseEinstein.com.
Yeah, House Einstein. All right, that's enough. Let's go on to the next property. 4731 McKinley Drive. So, I saw this house with 2 different buyers, maybe 3 different buyers. And I was in it at least 3 times. I think I saw it with 3 different buyers over the course of its listing life. The location is called Arapahoe Ridge. And this neighborhood was mostly built in the late 60s. It has larger than typical lots for Boulder. This one had a 9,500 square foot lot. It has a pocket park, which doesn't see a lot of transient activity because it's really a neighborhood park that isn't on the radar. It isn't on bike paths the way that a lot of parks are. Like, it's kind of a hidden park.
It's also next to the school, so I imagine, right, it's probably a little bit more...
They might be a little more aggressive with policing, but it also doesn't have any sort of retail attraction where you can easily panhandle. So it's mostly kids playing in the park, right? It's places to walk your dog. It's one of my favorite little parks in Boulder, the playground. I think there's a video of me playing on the playground for when we did the Arapahoe Ridge video. Yeah, there's a video for Arapahoe Ridge that I did a couple of years ago.
Great plug. Exactly what.
Thanks, Hamish. Thanks.
Yep.
So anyway, this particular house is a ranch without a basement. So it's just under 2,000 square feet, 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, 2-car attached garage, and it was listed at 1.1 in October. And it went under contract very quickly, but the first buyer bailed out for undisclosed reasons. And then the second buyer swooped in mid-November, and it just closed for full list. No discount at all disclosed. Full list price.
Yeah.
So this is not a story of getting a screaming deal. But when I saw the house, it was pretty clear the house was priced right. The landscaping in particular was really nice. And the kitchen was basically turnkey livable. I mean, the choice of granite, not current. You could swap out some light fixtures maybe. The carpets probably could use replacement. But it had a lot of things going for it that we really liked. The layout was had some little weirdness to it in where one of the bedrooms was located versus the others. The backyard landscaping was spectacular. When we walked on the floors repeatedly, it felt a little uneven in places. And for a house that has a crawl space,
basement, right? Yeah.
And maybe it has ducting down there. We assume the ducting is not going through the slab. We did not get it in the crawl space to check it out to see what was going on down there. But we knew that we were going to have to look pretty closely at this issue. If we were to put it under contract, we'd have to look closely to make sure there wasn't something going on with the foundation. But I didn't see anything in my multiple visits to the property that were red flags, more like yellow flags, which beg for just a little additional due diligence. So I think this is a great house because it works for so many different types of buyers. It would work potentially for somebody who's downsizing, somebody who may have some mobility issues, young professionals, young families, and in a great little neighborhood. So it's no surprise it's sold. I am surprised by the full list, though. You usually don't
especially
see
at this
that.
time. Yeah.
Well, especially for a house that went under contract already once. But sometimes the sellers have the price right, and they're not going to negotiate at all. And if you're a real estate agent and you know that's your client, you really need to communicate that to the other side before they set the expectation that the seller is going to discount this thing. Mm-hmm. Because people get really territorial in their negotiations. Yeah. And if they think they're getting a discount, which is normally what happens in the fourth quarter, particularly, and instead you're saying, no, the price is the price, take it or leave it, well, it'd be way better if the buy-side agent communicated that to their client before they wrote the offer. Because otherwise, it just sets the tone for a bad negotiation. And it's a much harder deal. But this person,
it's a good way to avoid disappointment, right, on both sides. Yeah.
I mean, it's rare that we have a client that wants that. But we will, when we have something that's outside the norm in any of the conditions, right? Let's say we had somebody, we wouldn't take this listing, but let's say, hypothetically, we had somebody that wanted to offer only half of what is typical for Boulder real estate as a commission. That said, look, we're only going to do 1.4. And 2.5 to 2.8 is the norm in Boulder. I would first not take the listing, but if I did, every time we had a showing, I would call before the showing.
I mean, yeah.
And say, look, I know this is weird, but it's only a 1.4% commission deal. So you're welcome to write whatever you want in the contract, but I want you to know that that's going to be a problem. And you may want to talk about a strategy with your client to make sure you get paid whatever you've agreed to get paid before you write this offer, because what you don't want to do is have that slap back in your face as a counter.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Comments on the house?
You have comments on the house?
Yep.
Go ahead.
A generalization. I haven't actually seen this one, but when you see a garage like this one with two separate doors, usually they're a little bit wider than a two-door garage door, if that makes sense. So if you're... Yeah.
You mean each individual door...
It's got two... Yeah.
Oh, that means the width of the overall garage is bigger than it would be if it was just a one door for a two-car garage. I agree with you. That's true.
I mean, that's, whatever, but as a car guy and somebody who is always looking for more storage, excellent feature. And then, Oz, I have a question for you. At what point does a ranch become rambling? Because mine is 2,000, but with a basement square footage, and this is 2,000, no basement.
It's sort of a euphemism.
Right.
So... I don't know if I'd call 2,000 square feet a rambling ranch. Did I use the word rambling?
No,
Okay.
No,
I was going to say, I would think rambling starts at 3,000, but this is one of those, like, I'm rambling right now, answering this question for you, but a rambling ranch, maybe 3,000 would be the start of rambling, maybe 3,500, but 2,000, and this is what I told my client.
Too small, right?
Before we went to see it, I said, it's only 2,000 square feet. And you're used to living in a much larger home. So this is probably too small for you, but let's go look at it because it's the fourth quarter and we leave no stone unturned.
Yeah. Okay. I'm ready for number 3. I was just kind of curious on that one.
Footnote, when you write an offer on a property that has come back to market, in addition to expecting it not to sell at list, you should also plan to do some due diligence on why the first contract failed. And once you are under contract, I would advise to request a copy of the termination notice as part of your due diligence documents. Put it in writing, ask for it. If they refuse to give it to you, it's going to raise a lot of red flags.
Yeah. Is it couth to contact the buy-side agent that terminated and see?
If you find out who it is, you can certainly call them, and I can tell you that I know most of the top agents. I know all the top agents in town. Probably all of them. I've done a deal with most of them, And if I call and ask them directly what happened with your deal, they don't have any particular vested interest in lying.
Yeah. Versus the seller, but I mean, the seller shouldn't be lying. Yeah.
But they may tell me that they found something scary, but more than not, their buyer just had a change of heart. Their buyer just decided it's the wrong house for them or whatever. Their buyer could also be somebody that is very difficult to please, and there's something particularly they found. But it's not uncommon for that agent to throw their client under the bus and say it's the client, not the house.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, good news if you're looking at getting the house. Versus, we did a mold test and the place will kill you if you stay longer than an hour,
And I will say on the flip side of that, Hamish, that if I get that phone call and my client terminated, I'm not going to say anything disrespectful about my client.
Yeah.
But if you did terminate for something really fickle that we shouldn't have written an offer for, I'm going to say that. I'm going to say, look, we terminated because the house is blue and they thought it was red. And they got into an argument in the driveway over the color, and this couple is just stressed out, and that's
now they're getting a divorce. No,
they're not. I would not. No. I would say there was something particular about the house. I wouldn't necessarily go into detail. It was something. It's not the house. I would be. We're always respectful to the other side and to our clients, and if we are
especially concerning privacy. Yeah.
If we have criticism, it's shared as generalities, and we will praise by name. So agent that listed this house, if you would like to tell us what happened and how you kept it at full list, I'd love to hear that backstory. Maybe another offer showed up at the same time. Sometimes that happens too.
Yeah. Oh, we should think about talking about that in a couple months, maybe. Dead listing, we'd reach out, and then suddenly it's a bidding war.
Oh, yeah. Let's see what it closes for first.
For sure.
And in fact, I have to reach out to that agent today to see if that deal's going to close, because it's been under contract for a month. That was a stale listing that suddenly got a late season bidding war. Yeah. And the agent asked me for full list, no inspection, if we wanted to stay
tuned for that. Yeah.
Stay tuned for that deal. Okay. Yeah. That war story. Let's move on to our last listing. And this listing is an example for why you never want to buy a house in a really compromised location. So this house has been on the market a long time. It was listed in March 2024, so March of this year, at 1.23, and they eventually just sold it for $935 after a series of price reductions. At one point it had been withdrawn, then it came back. And we looked at it multiple times with clients, different clients, all summer long. And the issue with this particular house, there were two. One, the quality of the work was not very impressive. The photos look fine. I don't know about going to the level of the tile choices they chose. Some of these tile choices are a little strong.
I'd say a bit too designer. Yeah.
Too designer, like they went a little too extreme on their designer choices. But the real issue was that it's right next to Table Mesa Drive. And Table Mesa Drive is nonstop traffic, 2 lanes. It's traffic that moves, frankly, in my opinion, too fast. And it is a constant stream of buses, exhaust, tires, trucks. And when people take the turn from Table Mesa onto 41st Street, they turn really fast. And so they're moving at a speed often of 40 miles an hour, and then they cut into the residential street on South 41st. This is not right on the corner, but it's only one in. And it can feel very unsettling if you have a small child or even an adult crossing that street and somebody has suddenly turned into it. So we, as when we represent buyers, we always tell them the rule is at least 3 houses from a busy street. And that's my personal rule. I would encourage even further if possible, but I would never buy a house that's closer than 3 houses in. This was 2 in, and it sold for only $935, despite being a house that has a full basement, a house that's very generously sized, 2,800 square feet, and a house with some nice updates. And these houses all day long are 1.2s. In Martin Acres, and the same house, move it to the center part of the neighborhood, will be 1.2 this summer.
Yeah, without question. It looks like no fridge. You're on IRES, right? You get the full skinny.
I don't remember no fridge as
wash and
part of the
dryer.
deal.
Just kitchen had no fridge in the pictures.
Yeah, which is sort of dumb to not reshoot the photos. No offense to the agent, I'm not naming you, but if your photos have no fridge and you later add a fridge, you should take more photos with the fridge, especially since you have new appliances elsewhere. Why would you not do the fridge?
Maybe they moved it for the photos. Keeps the kitchen looking big and bright.
Maybe. But then what's with that basement photo that's not even the same color tone? Anyway.
Anywho's it. Yep.
Anyway, yeah, I don't see anything about fridge exclusion, but hold on, let me look at... I mean, they're not going to exclude something that's not there. I don't remember...
Good point.
Meaning, yeah, it's not going to say fridge is excluded. It says... Yeah, there's no refrigerator in the list of inclusions. So it's quite possible it didn't have a fridge, but I think I would remember that as a weird thing, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, good eye.
Yeah.
There's $200,000 right there that they left. $300,000
Easy
that
negotiation.
this house would have sold for in the right location. You could fix everything but location, Hamish. That's the one thing.
Isn't there this like saying it's something like location? I think I've heard that once or twice, right?
Maybe
Yeah,
that
perhaps.
cliche has been around. All right. Those are the sales of the week. Let's hit up real estate news. How are we doing on time? We are doing great on time.
Yeah, I think we're doing quite well. Look at us, an oiled machine.
All right. Our first little bit of news is that, surprise, surprise, people are not very happy about the proposed changes in East Boulder zoning. And council have postponed voting on some of those long-anticipated zoning and land use changes. They were slated to vote on that last Thursday, but a slim majority opted to delay the vote after a fresh wave of pushback from business owners and commercial interests on some aspects of the proposed policy. So the East Boulder Sub-Community Plan is a thing. You can look it up online. Hamish, maybe we should provide a link in our show notes. This plan's been cooking for a while. North Boulder also has a sub-community plan. You should review these plans if you're thinking about buying a house in East Boulder or North Boulder. And the East Boulder sub-community plan is expected to add roughly 5,000 new housing units to be built over the next decade or two. And it turns out that some people aren't happy about that. Surprise, surprise. So
Who would have thought?
they're looking at rewriting some of these rules, and part of it is preserving business space that doesn't. So some of these owners have realized that these rules would limit their ability to max out the potential building or commercial use. So it's, these are sticky points. Landowners have an interest in preserving the value of their property, and zoning changes are often how municipalities take away value from owners, and that's what's happening. That's what's happening here.
I would imagine by incidents, right? Like the city is not like, you guys are worth too much. We're gonna tank your value, right?
So this is the thing that I don't think that's how they think. Okay,
Yeah.
I think that the pendulum has swung hard towards pro-development for housing. We are in a housing shortage statewide. Although with that said, we have 2 years of rising inventory and decreasing prices. But at the same time, we need more housing, and there's a lot of renters that would rather own. There's also a lot of pressure to create rental apartment buildings. The size of bureaucracy just keeps growing, and so that's a known thing. But if you when I talk to homeowners, okay, when I talk to potential clients, when I talk to people that live in this town and already own, none of them want to see an expansion of the city. They feel like the city is full, the city is plenty big enough, and they don't need less. They want to be able to drive around and not constantly be stuck in traffic, and they don't want big city issues. But city council is very different in its wiring, this current council, and so it's no surprise that they're continuing to push for the East Boulder Sub-Community Plan. We'll provide a link to the article in the in the show notes.
Oh, yeah.
And the fight ain't over because it was a slim majority, 5-4.
I do have to make like a quick nod to the irony, right? Like, I would find it kind of, if I got tired of Westminster getting too full and, I was like, I'm over it. Well, I moved here. So, when's the cutoff, right? Like, should it just be all Boulderites or, it's a tough conversation for sure.
Look, renters have rights too. Renters are citizens of our community. And most of those renters, I think, would prefer to own. Mm-hmm. But what the city keeps building is more rental apartments that are managed by the city.
Oh, so this is going to be a completely left field off tangent. I've got a buddy who manages, I think it's a neighborhood of about 100 homes, and they're all rentals. One huge company, owns all of it, and he runs around in a golf cart and manages and maintains these homes. But it's an entire neighborhood solely for renting.
And
like just the land use and everything, yeah.
There's an article in the Wall Street Journal about developments that are being built all over the country that are specifically just for renting, and they'll be owned by large corporations. So ask yourself, what would you rather have? Do you want to be a serf at the farm, or do you want to own your own little patch of dirt and a picket fence? The American dream is to not be a renter. I'm sorry.
No, I completely, yeah.
And at some point, we're gonna see council switch back the other way, where they're gonna restrict the ability to create for-profit rental projects that will never be owned by individuals.
Yeah, I'm sure the pendulum swing is going to be really smooth and easy, and yeah, at least in cities, it's usually a little bit better.
Yeah, let me read you this quote that I think really captures it, and this is from Boulder's Chamber CEO, President John Taylor.
Is this from the article?
Yeah, we all want to see more housing in the Boulder area, but we should not mandate housing. This is a critical economic zone for our community. Many of the businesses that are currently out there, or those that we foresee for the future, just are not compatible with housing. So we want to make sure that we're not doing anything that would undermine the vitality of that important economic zone for the city. And Meanwhile, there's like quotes saying, "I'm just so surprised by the last minute pushback." If you're surprised by pushback on council, I don't know what to tell you. Like, how
even if you're doing the perfect thing, you're still going to get pushback.
You're going to get pushback on everything. You're on council. That's why I don't want to run for council. Like, there's nothing that you can do that doesn't result in somebody pushing back. But yeah, okay. So next article. Worth talking about.
Yep.
And this one affects the livability of our community. So as most people know, the Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of a camping ban, and Boulder has been sued previously to that Supreme Court ruling for its camping ban. And the camping ban was the lawsuit was just dismissed by Boulder District Court Judge, a Boulder District Court Judge. It doesn't mention their name, by the way, which is interesting. So, in short, citing the Supreme Court ruling, the District Court Judge said that the lawsuit challenging Boulder's camping ban is gone. So, of course, they're going to... Oh, no, it does mention the District Court Judge's name, Robert Gunning. And such camping bans do not violate the 8th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. And so the ACLU...
filed in 2022. That's what I was looking for. Yeah.
Which gives you, by the way, May of 2022, tells you how long it takes to get through the court system when you go to district court. So likely they will appeal, but I think this is really good news for those that want to see our city enforce the camping ban and have fewer tents in our public places and fewer people living in our parks and along our creek paths. So the reason that people choose to live there is that they are not restricted in their drug and alcohol use. They can have their pets. And if I were unfortunate enough and struggling and found myself on the street, I wouldn't want to live at the shelter either. I would want to live where I could, enjoy
creek
my
sounds
life.
Great. Yeah.
Creek, hang out at the creek and drink sounds great. Unfortunately, because of fentanyl and mental disabilities, mental disorders. It's created a real sense of unsafety. In fact, I just had this conversation with a potential buyer of a student townhome for their CU student. And what are we talking about? We're talking about the risk of crossing the creek path at night for their 20-year-old daughter.
Their commute
coming
to
home
school,
late from
right?
classes, and she's got to walk along the creek path to get to her apartment. How safe is she going to feel? So and that's guiding our search. That's actually a decisive factor. It may or may not. They're thinking about it, but I think that this is not what our city parks and our open space was ever intended. Was as makeshift housing for people that want to do drugs and camp out and get drunk every day, which is
or those who are less fortunate.
Or those that are less fortunate and have a disability. Okay, fair. I'm not.
I'll
trying
asterisk
to say,
for you. No,
thank you. I'm not trying to say these are bad people. Okay, but we need to get a little tougher on what we allow in our city, and there's a cost that everyone else is incurring from.
Yeah,
people.
it ripples
homeless.
through the city, right?
And those people. Look, we need a better mental health care system, right?
Mm-hmm. And
we were in Greece for a period of time. We were in Athens and we were in the Cyclades, and I saw no homeless people, no tents. I saw one person flying a cardboard sign in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
and
jeez.
I can tell you Athens is far less affluent than Boulder, but I think it might have a far better system for managing homelessness and our social services than allowing our public spaces to be turned into campgrounds and allowing people to defecate and use drugs out in the open, take apart bicycles. It's got to stop. Yeah. And this is a step in the right direction. And again, I feel incredible compassion for those that are experiencing homelessness. I will say that again. And they need support, but this is not the answer.
What's striking for me is this lawsuit was filed prior to the Supreme Court ruling. And I think after this pod, I'm going to read in on it, but just figuring out how and why that works and kind of the story on it. Just the technicalities of the specific suit I'm kind of interested in.
Yeah, check it out. Let me know if you learn anything interesting about it.
Unrelated, I have a video to send you after the pod.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Unrelated. I look forward to it.
Yep.
And I don't know. I hope people understand that it's you could be compassionate and also protect our other citizens in the city. And it's not an easy issue, but I think we can solve it.
Yeah, I think it's one of the topics that whenever we bring up our heart rate spikes about 20 beats per minute, we want to, address and discuss it, but we don't also want to, ruffle too many feathers or really create waves on this. It's more of it impacts real estate. We see it in our clients. We see it in people coming to us to list. It's a reality.
One of our clients shared a story with me, Hamish, of being screamed at by somebody experiencing mental illness while she was pregnant. And this person was screaming first that they were pregnant too, second that they were going to come take her baby. It was so scary for her. I've had another client who was pushed through the window of the Boulder bookstore by somebody experiencing a mental health crisis and suffered severe cuts. It's real. You should be able to walk around at any time, day or night, anywhere in the city and feel safe. And if we do not have that happening, then we have a problem that we need to fix as a community.
Yeah. Got accused of being a trafficker when I was in college going to Metro.
A trafficker of what?
Sex trafficker.
What?
Hamish. I used to take the public transit down to Metro every morning, and to get to my 8 a.m. class, I had to leave at 5:30 in the morning. And the bus stop in Broomfield on 287 is where somebody else waiting for the bus. It was just under their breath and then louder and louder. And thankfully, the bus showed up and I was able to leave. But it was very awkward situation. So
this was somebody experiencing likely some sort of mental health issue and started screaming at you that you are a sex trafficker.
Yeah.
That's great. That's really fun.
So I was cool.
Oh my God! All right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that story.
Yeah.
Let's wrap up on happy notes, shall we?
Yeah.
With our carve-outs. So this is our carve-out section. It's a little tidbit of things that are totally not real estate related. If you're still listening to us, we're now talking about whatever we want to talk about for a very short period of time, just so we can share some stuff with you as humans that we think are fun and interesting to share.
Awesome. I have two. Should I hit it?
Go for it.
All right. First one. I don't know if I've talked publicly on the mic, or on the podcast, but I did not like the microphone that I've had beforehand. Hopefully, there's a audible difference in my voice, and maybe the podcast is a lot more consumable. That was one of my worries. And then just on that too, like I'm kind of the media man at House Einstein. I do a lot of the video, a lot of the content, and it just felt wrong to have a poor microphone when doing these podcasts. While on the subject, I do not recommend the Blue Snowball Ice microphone, especially compared to, like a proper setup. But what I put down on the show notes and what I wanted to bring up was kind of just like the thing we used to do as a family when I was living in Broomfield, going to high school there. There are a few neighborhoods that we love to kind of canvas or, drive through to look at the Christmas lights and kind of do like the, part of our holiday cheer kind of tradition. And there's a particular cul-de-sac, and I'm going to give Crossroads. It's in the neighborhood north of Main Street in 136 in Broomfield. And there's a cul-de-sac in there that it's like they got together and decided to organize together and decorate together. There would be like a hot chocolate stand. You'd walk through the front yards, and it was just like incredibly decked out with Christmas lights. Well, last year for Halloween, I thought it would be financially prudent to go and get a smoke machine. And so I hopped on like a fog machine. So I hopped on Facebook Marketplace and found one, and I head out there, and it was like the house of houses in that cul-de-sac. And I get to talking to the lady. She brings me into the garage, and the whole thing is, those like fold-out Walmart tables, just rows and rows of those with decorations on decorations on decorations, and they're all labeled and priced. And I was like, well, like what's going on? And she's been running that house and decorating that house essentially just for decorative purposes. Apparently, like they prepare in the spring, I think, begin decorating for I think at least 20 years or so. And she'd recently had some health setbacks and was selling everything and calling it quits. But it was really cool kind of meeting her and getting to be like, like my family, my partner, it was like all of us have come by and visited this house. It's who we, this is the house that we suggest people come visit if they want to see, holiday lights and stuff. And she was really touched by that and actually gave me like some balls and decorations as well on top of the fog machine. But it was just really cool kind of like meeting the person behind the house, and then we're in the holiday spirit and cheer, so I thought I'd share that. Yeah,
that's really nice. That's a very sweet story.
It was pretty neat. Yeah, pretty unique.
There's a house in Fort Collins that my in-laws live nearby, and we always walk to this house at Christmas time because the decorations and sound effects are so over the top.
They have sound effects too.
It's like 15 minutes of craziness that goes on at this house, and there's always a crowd. And those houses really, I love seeing people that take it to the next level. Personally, a little bit more subdued with our holiday lighting, but this year, my carve-out is that we have our in-laws staying with me. In fact, they may have just rolled up, and they'll be with us for about a week, and there are two little nephews that will be at our house, and we're going to do a lot of Christmassy holiday types of things. Sledding, cut down a Christmas tree from up here, and we've rearranged the house for it.
Childproofed it.
Childproofing, as well as setting things up in a way that makes sense for having littles in the house. And so I'm super excited. We don't normally have in-laws staying with us for a full week, and it's going to be a really nice time. So that's my big carve out. I thought about vehicles, Hamish. I know that you probably thought I was going to talk about
that
vehicles.
Too. Yeah, we should put that for next. Do you still have your Santa costume?
I have a Santa jacket and Santa pants, but you need a belt, and you need, I think, if you need the Santa hat and you need the beard. Why? Do you want to borrow this stuff?
No, I'm just thinking of you and the littles, and then the picture you took in that Santa jacket and hat.
My holiday card from a few
Yeah.
years ago. Yeah, I still have it. I think I might need to donate it soon, but I still have it. Yeah.
Do you still have the picture? Is that something we could in the show notes? Maybe not.
Well, there were two versions of that holiday card. The ones I sent my friends that I thought was funny, and the ones I sent my clients that I was not sure it was inappropriate to send the caption that it was me on a bicycle. It was anyway. Yeah, we could share the G-rated version.
Okay. Let's do that. The client.
The saucy, sparky, spicy version we will not share publicly anyway.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Awesome. And I don't know, I'm not going to go through, there's probably a decent amount of trouble to share that picture, a link to a picture in the show notes. So that'll be on the website once this podcast comes out. I'll put it in the show notes on the website. So houseeinstein.com if you make it this far.
That would be great. So thank you again, as always, for listening to the House Einstein Podcast. If you'd like more of our content, you can subscribe to our newsletter. It goes out most months, and there's stuff in that newsletter you will not see anywhere else. You can also check out our other social media. You will find us on Instagram and Facebook and X and LinkedIn, and you will also find us on YouTube, of course. And there's this podcast. You're already listening to it, but you can subscribe to it on Apple Podcasts or lots of other places. Don't forget to visit us at houseeinstein.com. And thank you again for joining us. We hope you have an amazing holiday season.